The sound of timber cracking in the dead of night brought Elias Norwood to his window with a loaded crossbow, his heart hammering against his ribs as he peered into the darkness beyond his northern fence line. What he saw made his breath catch, not bandits or wolves, but a massive figure dragging broken branches and scavenged wood planks, constructing something crude against the very posts he had set into the ground 5 years ago when he first claimed this land. By the pale light of the half-moon, he could make out green skin, broad shoulders, and the distinctive silhouette of an orc, and his first instinct was to loose the bolt and ask questions never. But something stopped him. Perhaps it was the way the figure moved, not with aggression or threat, but with the exhausted desperation of someone who had nowhere else to go. Perhaps it was the fact that, in 3 hours of watching from the shadows of his bedroom, the orc never once tried to breach his fence or approach his home, only worked in silence to build what looked like a lean-to shelter using his fence as one supporting wall. When dawn finally broke across the fields of barley and wheat, Elias could see her clearly. A young orc woman, her green skin marked with old scars, her dark hair matted and tangled, wearing what had once been leather armor but was now little more than rags held together by desperation and stubborn pride. She had collapsed against the lean-to sometime before sunrise, her breathing visible in the cold autumn air, her body curled tight against the chill. Elias stood in his kitchen, coffee growing cold in his hand, wrestling with a decision that felt impossibly heavy. Every sensible bone in his body screamed at him to ride to the village, to report the orc presence, to let the militia handle it as they always did. Orcs meant trouble, everyone knew that. They raided, they killed, they burned. The war might have ended 3 years ago with a fragile treaty, but that did not mean the hatred had died, and it certainly did not mean an orc camping on your property was anything but a threat. Yet when he looked at her through the window, he did not see a warrior or a raider. He saw someone who had built a shelter so crude that it would barely keep out the rain, someone who had chosen the most remote corner of his property, as far from his house as possible while still technically being on his land. He saw someone who was trying very hard not to be seen, not to cause trouble, just to survive. Elias was 32 years old, a veteran of the border conflicts who had bought this farm with his discharge pay and the coin from 6 years of fighting. He had seen orcs in battle, had killed his share and been nearly killed in return. He knew what they were capable of when roused to violence. But he had also seen them retreat when their position became untenable, had seen them carry their wounded from the field, had once watched from a hilltop as an orc war party gave their fallen a funeral with singing that had carried across the valley like a lament for all the world's sorrows. They were not mindless beasts. They were people, however much the preachers and politicians wanted to claim otherwise. He made his decision before he could talk himself out of it. The soup was simple vegetable broth with barley, onions, carrots, and the last of the salt pork from his stores. He filled a wooden bowl, covered it with a cloth, and walked out into the morning cold with his heart in his throat and his hunting knife at his belt, though he knew the knife would do him little good if she decided to attack. Orcs were stronger than humans, faster too, and she was bigger than him by a head even in her weakened state. His boots crunched on the frost-stiff grass as he approached the fence line. She heard him coming, her eyes snapped open when he was still 20 paces away, and she scrambled to her feet with a speed that belied her exhaustion. Up close, he could see she was young, perhaps 20, with small tusks that jutted from her lower jaw and eyes the color of amber that watched him with a mixture of fear and defiance. "I am not here to hurt you," Elias said, stopping a respectful distance away. He held up the bowl so she could see it. "I brought food. You look like you need it." She stared at him as if he had spoken in a language she did not understand. Her hand had gone to her belt, where a chipped sword hung in a makeshift scabbard, but she did not draw it. Her eyes flicked from his face to the bowl and back again, searching for the trap, the trick, the cruelty that she clearly expected. "I am going to set it here," Elias continued, his voice calm and level as if he were talking to a spooked horse. "On this side of the fence. You can take it or leave it. Your choice." He set the bowl on the ground, took 3 deliberate steps backward, and then turned and walked back to his house without looking back. His shoulders were tense, waiting for the sound of pursuit or the whistle of a thrown blade, but nothing came. When he reached his porch and finally risked a glance over his shoulder, the bowl was gone and the orc woman had retreated into her lean-to. Nothing visible but the gleam of amber eyes watching from the shadows. That night, he found the bowl sitting on his porch, cleaned so thoroughly it looked newly made, and inside it was a small bundle of dried herbs, the kind used for treating infection. It was the only thing she had to offer in return, and the gesture hit Elias harder than he expected. She had nothing, but she had given him something anyway because she would not accept charity without payment. There was honor in that, a kind of pride he understood in his bones. The next evening he brought soup again. This time she was sitting outside the lean-to when he approached, her sword across her knees in a way that was not quite threatening but made her readiness clear. He set the bowl down in the same place, and this time he spoke. "My name is Elias. I own this farm. You are welcome to stay as long as you need to." Her eyes widened slightly, and he thought he saw her fingers tighten on the sword hilt, but she said nothing. He left the bowl and returned to his house, and that night found it cleaned again, this time with a handful of late-season blackberries inside that she must have foraged from the woods beyond his property. It became a routine. Every evening as the sun set, Elias would bring a bowl of soup to the fence line, and every morning he would find it returned with some small offering inside berries, herbs, once a rabbit already skinned and cleaned. They did not speak beyond his initial greeting, but a conversation was happening nonetheless, conducted in the language of small kindnesses and careful respect. 3 weeks into this arrangement, the first snow came. Elias woke to a world transformed into white, beautiful and deadly, and his first thought was of the lean-to that would provide almost no protection against the storm. He dressed quickly, built up the fire in his hearth, and made a thick stew of venison and root vegetables, then filled a larger bowl than usual and bundled himself into his winter coat. She was still in the lean-to, wrapped in what looked like an old horse blanket that she must have scavenged from somewhere, her lips tinged blue and her whole body shaking with cold. When she saw him approaching through the snow, she tried to stand but stumbled, her legs unwilling to support her. "Come inside," Elias said, and his voice left no room for argument. "You will die out here." "I cannot," she said, and her voice was rough from disuse, deeper than a human woman's but not unpleasant. "Humans, they would not." "I am human, and I am telling you to come inside before you freeze to death," Elias interrupted. "Whatever happened to you, whatever you are running from, it does not matter right now. What matters is surviving the night." She stared at him, and he could see the war happening behind her eyes, pride against survival, fear against desperate need. Survival won. She nodded once, a jerky motion, and struggled to her feet. Elias stepped forward to help her, and she flinched, but she allowed him to steady her when she stumbled. Up close, he could feel the cold radiating from her body, could see the way her hands were nearly white despite her green skin, the beginnings of frostbite taking hold. Getting her to the house was an ordeal. She was heavy with muscle and weakened by cold, and twice she nearly fell, but Elias kept her upright through sheer stubbornness. By the time they reached his door, he was sweating despite the cold, and she was barely conscious. He got her inside, kicked the door shut against the wind, and guided her to the chair closest to the fire. She collapsed into it with a shudder that racked her whole frame. Elias threw another log on the fire, then went to his chest and pulled out every blanket he owned, piling them over her until she was nearly buried. Then he pressed the bowl of stew into her hands. "Eat," he commanded, slowly. "Your stomach will not thank you if you rush it." She obeyed, and he tried very hard not to watch the way she ate like someone who had been hungry for a very long time, who knew this might be her last meal and was determined to savor it despite that knowledge. When the bowl was empty, he refilled it without comment, and she ate that too, more slowly this time. Color was beginning to return to her skin, the blue fading from her lips. Elias busied himself with banking the fire to last through the night, trying to give her space, trying not to stare. He had never been this close to an orc outside of combat, had certainly never had one sitting in his home by his fire. She was, he had to admit it, striking in a way he had not expected. Strong-featured, with high cheekbones and a jawline that could cut glass, her eyes bright and intelligent beneath dark brows. The tusks that jutted from her lower lip were small and somehow suited her face, and her hair, now that he could see it properly, was black and thick, though tangled and dirty. "Thank you," she said finally, and the words sounded like they cost her. "You did not have to help me." "No," Elias agreed, settling into the chair across from her. "But I wanted to. What is your name?" She hesitated, and he thought she might not answer, but then she said, "Grushna. My name is Grushna." "It is good to meet you properly, Grushna. What brought you to my fence line in the middle of the night?" Her expression shuddered closed, pain flashing across her features before she locked it away behind walls of stone. "That is not a story for tonight," Elias nodded. "Fair enough. The storm will last at least through tomorrow, maybe longer. You should stay here until it passes. I have a spare room upstairs. It is small, but it has a bed and a window. Better than that lean-to." "I cannot pay you," Grushna said, and there was shame in her voice that made Elias's chest ache. "I am not asking you to pay me. I am asking you to not die of cold on my property, because it would be a terrible inconvenience to bury you in frozen ground." She blinked at him, and then something happened that he did not expect. She laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, rusty from disuse but genuine. "You are a strange human, Elias Norwood." "So I have been told," he replied with a small smile. "Come on, let me show you the room." The spare room had been used for storage, full of old equipment and supplies, but it had a narrow bed with a straw mattress and a trunk for clothes. Elias cleared out the worst of the clutter while Grushna stood in the doorway, still wrapped in blankets, watching him with an expression he could not read. "It is not much," he said when he finished, "but it is warm and dry. There is a basin for washing if you want it, and I will bring up some clean clothes. They will be too small, but they are better than what you are wearing." "Why are you doing this?" Grushna asked, and her voice was raw with confusion and something that might have been hope. "You do not know me. I am Orc. Your people and mine have been killing each other for generations. Why show me kindness?" Elias stopped, considering his words carefully. "I have seen enough killing. I spent 6 years on the border, fighting in skirmishes and raids, watching good people die for reasons that seemed less and less important as time went on. When the treaty was signed, I took my pay and I bought this land because I wanted to build something instead of destroying things. I wanted to grow food instead of burying bodies. And when you showed up at my fence, alone and desperate, I had a choice. I could see you as an enemy and treat you accordingly, or I could see you as a person who needed help. I chose the latter. Maybe that makes me a fool, but I have been called worse. Grushna stared at him for a long moment, and he saw her throat work as she swallowed hard. I will not hurt you, she said finally, fiercely. I will not repay your kindness with betrayal, on my honor such as it is. I believe you, Elias said, and he was surprised to realize he meant it. Get some rest, Grushna. We can talk more in the morning. He left her there and returned downstairs, his mind spinning. What was he doing? Taking in an orc, giving her shelter in his home if the village found out, they would call him a traitor, or mad, or both. The elders would demand she be driven off or killed, and they might decide he was too compromised to be trusted. He could lose everything he had built here. But when he closed his eyes, he saw her huddled in that pathetic lean-to, freezing to death rather than ask for help, because she knew what the answer would be. He saw the careful way she had cleaned his bowl every night, the small gifts she left in return for his soup. He saw honor and pride and stubborn determination to survive despite a world that wanted her dead. No, he had made the right choice. He would deal with the consequences if they came. The storm lasted 3 days. 3 days of howling wind and snow that piled in drifts against the house and barn. 3 days of being trapped inside with a stranger who was also, somehow, becoming something like a friend. The first morning, Grushna came downstairs before dawn, moving quietly as if trying not to wake him, but Elias was already up and making breakfast. She stopped in the doorway of the kitchen, wrapped in one of his spare shirts that was comically small on her frame, the sleeves ending halfway down her forearms and the shoulders straining at the seams. "Good morning," Elias said, as casually as if he had orc guests every day. "I am making porridge. Do you want some?" "Yes," Grushna said after a moment. "Thank you." They ate in awkward silence, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the wind battering the shutters. Elias searched for something to say, some way to bridge the gulf of species and history and mutual distrust, but everything that came to mind seemed either too personal or too trivial. It was Grushna who broke the silence. "You asked what brought me here," she said, her eyes on her bowl. "The answer is, my clan cast me out." Elias set down his spoon, giving her his full attention. "Why?" "Because I refused to participate in a raid." Her voice was flat, emotionless, but he could hear the pain beneath it. 6 weeks ago, our war chief decided the treaty meant nothing. He wanted to attack a human settlement, to take supplies and captives before winter. I argued against it. I said we had signed the treaty in good faith, that breaking it would bring the full weight of the human armies down on us, that we would all die for the sake of his pride. He said I was a coward and a traitor to my people. When I still refused to go, he declared me oath-broken and cast me out. I was given 1 day to leave clan lands or be killed. "So you walked," Elias said quietly. "I walked. For weeks. I avoided human settlements, avoided everyone. I had nothing but my sword and the clothes I wore. I foraged, I stole when I had to. I kept moving because stopping meant dying. And then I found your farm, empty land in the middle of nowhere, and I thought maybe I could rest for a few days. Build a shelter, gather some strength, and then move on. I did not expect." She gestured around the kitchen at him, at the impossible situation they found themselves in. "I did not expect kindness." "I am sorry that happened to you," Elias said, and he meant it. "For what it is worth, I think you made the right choice. Refusing to break the treaty, that took courage." Grushna's laugh was bitter. "It took foolishness. If I had stayed silent, I would still have a home, a family, a purpose. And you would have participated in a raid that might have killed innocent people. Would you have been able to live with that?" She met his eyes, and hers were haunted. "No, But some days I wonder if dying with my clan would have been easier than living like this." Elias did not have an answer for that. What could he say to someone who had lost everything for the sake of principle? Instead, he reached across the table and did something that would have horrified his younger self. He placed his hand over hers. Her skin was warm, rough with calluses, and she stiffened at the contact but did not pull away. "You are alive," he said. "That matters. And you are not alone anymore, at least not for now. That has to count for something." Grushna stared at their joined hands, and when she looked up at him, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care?" "Because someone should," Elias said simply. "Because you deserve to be cared about. Because I have spent too much of my life seeing people as enemies before I saw them as people, and I am trying to be better than that." A single tear escaped and traced down her green cheek, and she wiped it away with her free hand, almost angry at herself for the display of weakness. But she did not pull her hand away from his, and they sat there in the warm kitchen while the storm raged outside. Two people from opposite sides of a war finding unexpected comfort in each other's presence. The days of the storm passed in a strange domestic rhythm. Elias tended to his animals in the barn, fighting through the snow to make sure his cow, chickens, and 2 pigs had food and water. Grushna, despite his protests that she was a guest and should rest, insisted on helping. She was shockingly good with the animals. The cow, who was usually skittish around strangers, seemed to calm under her hands, and the chickens did not even peck at her when she collected eggs. "I grew up on a farm," she explained when Elias commented on it. "Before I was old enough to train as a warrior. My mother bred goats and grew grain. I spent my childhood doing work like this." "You must miss it," Elias said, forking hay into the cow's stall. "Every day," Grushna admitted. She was quiet for a moment, then added, "Tell me about your family." "Do you have one?" "Not anymore. My parents died when I was young. Fever took them both in the same winter. I was raised by my uncle, who was a soldier. He taught me to fight, and when I was old enough, I joined the army. It was the only life I knew." Elias paused, remembering. "My uncle died 4 years ago in one of the last battles before the treaty. He is buried in a military cemetery 3 days' ride from here. I visit when I can." "I am sorry," Grushna said softly. "So am I. He was a hard man, but he loved me in his way." "He would probably have hated me taking you in," Elias admitted with a rueful smile. "He had no love for orcs, lost too many friends to raids. And yet you are not like him." "I am trying not to be. He was shaped by war, and war makes people cruel. I want to be shaped by something else. Something better." Grushna looked at him with an expression he could not quite read, something soft and wondering. "You are a good man, Elias Norwood." "I am trying to be," he said again, and found himself meaning it more each time he said it. In the evenings, they sat by the fire and talked. Grushna told him about orc culture, about the clan structures and the complex web of honor and obligation that governed their society. She spoke of festivals and traditions, of the songs they sang and the stories they told, and Elias listened with fascination. He had spent 6 years fighting orcs and had never known any of this, had never thought to wonder if they had music and art and all the things that made a people human, or, in this case, people. In return, he told her about human customs, about the village and its politics, about the seasons of farming and the satisfaction of bringing in a good harvest. He told her about books he had read and places he had seen during his time in the army, and she listened with the hunger of someone who had been denied knowledge all her life. On the 3rd night, as the storm finally began to break, they played a dice game that Grushna taught him, laughing when he lost spectacularly 3 times in a row. Her laughter was becoming more frequent, less rusty, and it did something strange to his heart every time he heard it. "You are terrible at this," she said, grinning around her tusks. "I am letting you win," Elias protested, though they both knew it was a lie. "Of course you are. That is why you look so frustrated every time you lose." "I am not frustrated, I am strategizing. Your strategy needs work." They were smiling at each other across the table, and Elias realized with a jolt that somewhere in the past 3 days, something had shifted. He was not just tolerating Grushna's presence or even simply being kind to her. He enjoyed her company. He liked her laugh, her sharp wit, the way she did not let him get away with nonsense. He liked coming downstairs in the morning and finding her already up, making tea in his kitchen like she belonged there. He liked the way she hummed while she worked in the barn, orc songs in a language he did not understand but found beautiful anyway, and that was dangerous. That was something he could not afford to feel. But when Grushna smiled at him, her amber eyes warm in the firelight, he could not bring himself to care about the danger. When the storm finally ended, and the world emerged into crystalline winter sunshine, Elias knew the idyll was over. Grushna would have to return to the lean-to, or better yet, find somewhere else to go before someone from the village came by and saw her. It was too risky for her to stay. He opened his mouth to say this over breakfast, but before he could speak, Grushna said, "I should leave." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. "What? I have put you in danger long enough. If your people find out you have been sheltering me, they will turn on you. I will not repay your kindness by destroying your life." Her voice was firm, decided, though he could see the pain in her eyes. "Where will you go?" Elias asked, hating how hollow his voice sounded. "South, maybe. I have heard there are free cities beyond the mountains, places where the treaty is taken more seriously, where someone like me might find work." She did not sound convinced, and Elias did not blame her. It was a thin hope at best. "That is at least a month's travel on foot in winter," he said. "You will never make it." "I have made it this far." "Barely. Grushna, you were nearly dead when I found you, and that was before the real cold set in. You have no supplies, no proper clothes, no food stores. You will die in the mountains." "Then I die," Grushna said, and there was a terrible resignation in her voice. "But I will not drag you down with me. What if you stayed?" The words were out before Elias could stop them, reckless and impossible and completely sincere. Grushna stared at him like he had lost his mind. "Stay? Here? Elias, that is madness, maybe, but think about it. No one from the village comes out here except in summer when they buy grain. It is winter now, we would have months before anyone visited. You could stay in the house, help with the farm work. By spring—" He trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence. "By spring what? The problem would be the same. By spring I would still be an orc, and you would still be a human who has committed treason by harboring me," Grushna said bluntly. "This cannot work, Elias. You know this. I know that I do not want you to die in the snow. I know that you are the best help I have ever had with the animals. I know that I have enjoyed these past 3 days more than I have enjoyed any time since I bought this farm. Is that not worth something?" Grushna stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. She paced to the window, her back to him, her shoulders rigid with tension. "You are asking me to risk your life along with mine. If we are discovered, we will deal with it if it happens, together." She spun to face him. Why would you do this? You barely know me." "Because it is the right thing to do." Elias stood as well, frustration bleeding into his voice. "Because you deserve a chance at a life, at safety, at something more than running and hiding until you collapse. Because—" He stopped, the next words catching in his throat, too dangerous to say. "Because what?" Grushna pressed, stepping closer. "Because I care about you," Elias thought. "Because in 3 days you have become important to me in a way I do not understand and cannot explain." Because the thought of you leaving makes me feel like I am losing something precious that I did not even know I had. But he could not say any of that. It was too much, too soon, too complicated. So instead he said, because you make good tea and you are better at dice than me. It was a weak joke, a deflection, but it worked. Grushna's rigid posture softened and she huffed out a breath that might have been a laugh. Your tea is terrible, she said. It tastes like hot leaf water. That is literally what tea is. No, good tea has flavor. Your tea has regret. Despite everything, Elias laughed. Stay, he said again, quieter this time. Please, at least until spring. Give yourself a chance to rest and heal and figure out what you want to do. I promise I will do everything I can to keep you safe. Grushna searched his face for a long moment, and he tried to keep his expression open, honest, hoping she could see that he meant every word. Finally, she sighed, a long exhale of surrender. Until spring, she said. But if there is any sign of trouble, any indication that we have been discovered, I leave immediately. I will not let you suffer for my sake. Deal, Elias said, and the relief that flooded through him was so intense it made him dizzy. They shook on it, her hand engulfing his, both of them pretending this was a simple business arrangement and not something that felt monumentally, terrifyingly significant. Winter deepened. The days grew short and brutally cold, and the farm became a small island of warmth and life in a frozen world. Elias and Grushna fell into a routine that felt startlingly natural. They rose before dawn to tend the animals, worked together to maintain the property and prepare for the coming spring, and spent the long evenings by the fire, talking or playing games or sitting in comfortable silence. Grushna proved to be an invaluable partner. She was stronger than Elias, and could do the heavy lifting that usually required him to strain and struggle. She repaired the barn roof where it had been leaking, fixed the fence posts that had rotted through, and reorganized his storage shed with ruthless efficiency. In return, Elias taught her to read. She had known the basics. Orcs had a written language, though literacy was not universal, but human letters were different, and she attacked the challenge with fierce determination. This makes no sense, she muttered one evening, glaring at the book of farming techniques Elias had given her. Why do humans have 3 letters that all make the same sound? It is because English is actually 3 languages in a coat pretending to be one language, Elias said, looking up from the harness he was mending. Do not ask me to explain it, I just work here. Grushna snorted. Your language is broken. You are not wrong. Despite the frustration, she kept at it, and within a month she was reading simple texts fluently. Elias came home from checking the traps one day to find her curled in his favorite chair, completely absorbed in a volume of old poetry he had inherited from his uncle. Any good? He asked, stomping snow off his boots. It is sad, Grushna said without looking up. This poet, he writes about a woman he loved who died young. Every poem is about missing her. That is Lord Tennyson. My uncle loved him. Used to recite the poems from memory when he had enough to drink. Did your uncle lose someone too? Elias paused, remembering. Yes. A woman he loved before the war. She married someone else while he was gone. He never really got over it. Grushna finally looked up at him, her expression thoughtful. Love seems to cause humans a lot of pain. It causes everyone pain, I think, but it is supposed to be worth it. Is it? Worth it, I mean. Elias met her eyes and something passed between them, electric and unspoken. I think it could be, he said quietly, with the right person. Grushna held his gaze for a moment longer, then looked back down at the book, but he saw color rise in her green cheeks. Neither of them said anything more, but the air in the room felt charged, heavy with things neither of them were ready to acknowledge. The trouble came in midwinter. 2 months after Grushna had agreed to stay. Elias was in the village, buying supplies and pretending everything was normal, when he overheard a conversation in the general store that made his blood run cold. "I am telling you, there is an orc in the area," old Marcus was saying to the shopkeeper. "Found tracks near my property bigger than any human. Fresh, too, maybe a week old." "Could be a bear," the shopkeeper suggested. "Do bears wear boots?" These were footprints shaped like a person's. "Orc, I am sure of it. Probably a scout for a raiding party. We should organize a hunting party, find it before it brings back friends." Elias forced himself to keep examining the sacks of flour on the shelf, his heart pounding. Old Marcus's farm was only an hour's walk from his own, through the woods. Grushna must have left tracks when she went foraging for the herbs she used to season their food. He had told her to be careful, to stay close to the farm, but she was used to ranging far and would not have thought anything of it. "I will talk to the elders," the shopkeeper was saying. "See about organizing a sweep of the area. Cannot be too careful." Elias bought his supplies as quickly as he could without seeming suspicious, and rode home at a pace that had his horse snorting in protest. He found Grushna in the barn, brushing down the cow, humming one of her orc songs. "We have a problem," he said without preamble, and quickly explained what he had overheard. Grushna's face went pale. "I was careful," she said. "I did not go near any other farms. Marcus's land borders mine to the northeast. If you went into the woods that direction, I did. 3 days ago, looking for wintergreen, I thought I was on your land. It is an easy mistake. The boundary is not marked." Elias ran a hand through his hair, thinking frantically. "You need to stay inside. Do not go out at all unless I am with you. If they organize a hunting party, they will search the woods first, but if they find the lean-to, they will come here," Grushna finished. She set down the brush, her jaw set with determination. "I should leave now, tonight, before they start searching." "No." The word came out more forcefully than Elias intended. "It is too dangerous. There is a storm coming. Can you not smell it in the air? You will be caught in it, and if the hunting party is out, they will find you for sure. At least here you have shelter and a chance. A chance to get you killed when they find me. They will not find you. We will be smart. You stay in the house, keep away from the windows during the day. If anyone comes to the door, you hide in the root cellar. We have weathered this much, we can weather a little more." Grushna looked at him with an expression caught between frustration and something that looked like affection. "You are a stubborn man. So I have been told. Do we have a deal?" She sighed but nodded. "Until the danger passes. But Elias, if they come for me, you do not try to protect me. You let them take me. Promise me." "I will do no such thing." "Elias, no, Grushna. I am not going to promise to stand aside and let you be killed or dragged off to some prison. We are in this together, remember? That was the deal." She stared at him, and he saw the moment she realized he was not going to budge on this. "You are an idiot," she said, but her voice was soft, almost tender. "Probably. But I am your idiot, apparently." The words hung in the air between them, more significant than Elias had intended. Grushna's eyes widened, and he saw her take a sharp breath. For a moment he thought she might say something, might acknowledge the thing that had been growing between them all winter, but then she looked away, breaking the moment. "We should prepare," she said. "If they are organizing a hunting party, we do not have much time." They spent the rest of the day making the house look as innocuous as possible. Grushna moved all her belongings to the root cellar, a small underground space accessed through a trapdoor in the kitchen. Elias brought down blankets and a lamp, making it as comfortable as possible, though it was still cramped and dark and cold. "If someone comes, you hide here and you stay quiet no matter what you hear," he instructed. "I will get rid of them as quickly as I can. And if you cannot, If they insist on searching, then I stall them until you can slip out and run for the woods. There is a path that leads to the river. Follow it south for 2 miles and you will find a hunter's cabin. It is abandoned, but it is shelter. Wait there for me." Grushna nodded, memorizing the instructions. Her face was calm, but Elias could see the fear in her eyes, and it broke his heart. "It will be okay," he said, wishing he believed it. "We will get through this. Together," Grushna asked, and there was something almost pleading in her voice. "Together," Elias confirmed. The hunting party came 2 days later, just after dawn. Elias heard the horses before he saw them, and had just enough time to make sure Grushna was hidden in the root cellar before there was a pounding on his door. He opened it to find 5 men on horseback, all armed, all wearing the grim expressions of people ready for violence. He recognized them all: Marcus, the blacksmith's son Thomas, 2 farmers from the village, and leading them was Edward Pike, one of the elders and a man who had never liked Elias much. "Elias," Edward said with a nod that was barely civil, "we are searching for an orc. Tracks were found near Marcus's property. Have you seen anything unusual?" "No," Elias said, keeping his voice level and bored. "Just been keeping to myself. Winter work, you know how it is. Mind if we look around?" It was not really a question. Elias minded very much, but refusing would only make them suspicious. "Go ahead. Not much to see." The men dismounted and began searching. Elias watched, his heart in his throat, as they checked the barn and the shed and walked the perimeter of the property. Edward stayed on the porch, his eyes sharp and suspicious. "You have been out here alone all winter?" he asked. "That is right. Must get lonely. I like the quiet, HM." Edward looked around, and Elias could see him taking in the neatly repaired fence, the barn with its new roof, the general air of a property that was well maintained. "You have been busy." "Like I said, winter work. Strange, though. That is a lot of work for one man. Heavy work, too. That roof, for instance, would have taken 3 men to shift those beams." Elias felt sweat prickle on his back despite the cold. "I am stronger than I look, and I had time. Not much else to do." Edward did not look convinced, but before he could press further, Thomas called out from near the fence line. "Found something." Elias's heart stopped. Edward was off the porch in an instant, striding toward where Thomas was standing, and Elias followed, his mind racing through 1,000 lies and excuses. But it was not the lean-to Thomas had found Grushna had dismantled that weeks ago. Instead, he was pointing at footprints in the old snow, half melted and refrozen but still visible. Footprints that were too big to be Elias's. "Well," Edward said slowly, "what do we have here?" "Could be from weeks ago," Elias said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "A traveler passing through." "Or an orc," Edward countered. He turned to the other men. "Fan out. Search every inch of this property. If there is an orc here, we find it." They searched for 2 hours. They checked every building, every corner, every possible hiding place. They did not find the root cellar. The trapdoor was well concealed, and Elias had piled sacks of grain over it that morning, but they found other things. A bowl that was too large for Elias's hands. A comb with strands of black hair that were too coarse to be human. Small things, but damning. Edward held up the comb, his expression triumphant and cold. "Want to explain this?" Elias scrambled for a lie. "I found it in the woods, thought it might be valuable." "You found an orc's comb in the woods and brought it home." "I did not know it was an orc's comb. I just thought it was a comb." "You are lying." Edward stepped closer, his hand on his sword. "You have been harboring an orc. That is treason, Norwood. That is a hanging offense." "I have not been harboring anyone," Elias said, but he could hear the desperation creeping into his voice. "I live alone." "Then you will not mind if we search the house more thoroughly." They tore through his home like a storm. They overturned furniture, rifled through his belongings, smashed a jar of preserves just because they could. And inevitably, one of them kicked aside the sacks of grain and found the trapdoor. "Here," Marcus shouted. "There is a cellar." Edward was there in an instant. He grabbed the handle and pulled, and the door swung open to reveal the small space below. Elias could not see into the darkness from where he stood, but he saw Edward's face change, saw the cruel satisfaction bloom across his features. "Come out," Edward commanded. "Now, or we drag you out." There was a long, terrible pause. Then Grushna climbed out of the cellar, her head held high despite the fear in her eyes. She was unarmed. They had agreed her sword would only make things worse, and she looked small despite her size, vulnerable in a way that made Elias's chest ache. The men reacted immediately, swords drawn, shouting. Edward grabbed Grushna's arm and she let him, did not resist even though Elias knew she could have broken the old man like a twig. "So," Edward said, his voice dripping with venom, "the rumors of Elias Norwood's treason were true. You have been sheltering an orc. She is not dangerous," Elias said desperately. "She is just trying to survive. She has done nothing wrong. She is an orc. That is wrong enough. Marcus, Thomas, bind her. We will take her to the village for judgment." "No." Elias stepped forward, but two of the farmers grabbed him, holding him back. "Please listen to me. She is not a threat. She was cast out by her clan for refusing to raid human settlements. She has been helping me on the farm. She has done nothing to deserve this." "The law is the law," Edward said coldly. "Orcs are not permitted on human land. You know this, Norwood. You knew it when you took her in." They were binding Grushna's wrists with rough rope, and she was letting them, her eyes locked on Elias's face. He could see her mouthing something, and it took him a moment to realize it was, "I am sorry." "Do not hurt her," Elias said, his voice breaking. "Please, I will do anything. I will leave. I will pay any fine you want. Just do not hurt her." Edward looked at him with something that might have been pity if it were not so cold. "You should have thought of that before you betrayed your own people. Take them both. They will face the elders together." They were dragged to the village in chains, Grushna with her wrists bound, and a rope around her neck like an animal, Elias with his hands tied behind his back. The journey took 3 hours, and by the time they arrived, Elias's wrists were bleeding and Grushna had bruises blooming on her green skin from where the men had shoved and struck her when she did not move fast enough. The village square was already full of people when they arrived. Word had spread quickly, and it seemed like everyone had come to see the orc and the traitor who had sheltered her. Elias heard the jeers and shouts, saw people he had known for years looking at him with hatred and disgust. Someone threw a rock that struck Grushna in the shoulder, and she flinched but did not cry out. They were brought before the council of elders in the meeting hall, a long room with a high ceiling and benches along the walls where villagers crowded in to watch. The 5 elders sat at a table at the front, their faces stern and unyielding. Edward took his place among them and began recounting what they had found. "The evidence is clear," he concluded. "Elias Norwood has been harboring an orc on his property for months, in direct violation of the law and the treaty. He has betrayed his people and consorted with the enemy." "What do you have to say for yourself?" asked Elder Catherine, a woman who had always been kind to Elias before today. Elias took a breath, choosing his words carefully. "I do not deny that Grushna has been staying on my land, but she is not an enemy. She was cast out by her clan for refusing to participate in a raid against humans. She has been helping me on my farm, working alongside me. She has done nothing to harm anyone. She is an orc," Edward spat. "Her very existence is a threat." "She is a person," Elias countered, his voice rising. A person who deserves to be treated with dignity and compassion, not hunted and bound like an animal. If we cannot see that, if we cannot show mercy to someone who has shown us no harm, then what does that make us? Survivors, said Elder Thomas grimly. We have been at war with the orcs for generations, boy. They have killed our people, burned our homes, destroyed our lives. You are too young to remember the worst of it, but we do. We remember. And what about the treaty? Elias demanded. We signed a peace accord. We agreed to end the killing. The treaty does not require us to welcome orcs into our homes, Catherine said. Especially not orcs who are oath breakers and exiles. She has no clan, no protection under orc law. She is nothing. She is not nothing. The words tore out of Elias before he could stop them. She is smart and kind and honorable. She works harder than anyone I know. He stopped, the next words catching in his throat, but he forced them out anyway. She matters to me. The room went silent. Elias could feel everyone staring at him, could see the horror and disgust on their faces as they understood what he was really saying. You have feelings for this creature, Edward said, and his voice was filled with revulsion. You have betrayed not just your people, but your own humanity. My humanity is not defined by who I hate, Elias shot back. If anything, I think it is defined by who I love. Enough. The word came from Elder Marcus, the oldest of the council and usually the quietest. We have heard enough. It is time to decide. The elders conferred among themselves in low voices while the crowd murmured. Elias looked at Grushna, who had been silent through all of this, standing with her head bowed. He tried to catch her eye to give her some comfort, but she would not look at him. Finally, the elders turned back to face them. We have reached a decision, Catherine announced. Elias Norwood, you are found guilty of treason and violation of the treaty. Your lands are forfeit, and you are banished from this village and all human territories under our jurisdiction. The words hit Elias like a physical blow, but he had expected them. What came next was worse. As for the orc, Catherine continued, and her voice was hard. By the terms of the treaty, she should be turned over to her clan for judgment, but she has no clan. Therefore, she will be executed at dawn tomorrow, and her body burned as an example to any other orcs who might think to trespass on human land. No, Elias lunged forward, but the guards held him back. You cannot. She has done nothing wrong. She is an orc on human land without permission or protection. That is enough. Catherine's face was impassive. Take them to the holding cells. The sentences will be carried out tomorrow. They were dragged away, Elias fighting and shouting, Grushna silent and still. They were thrown into separate cells in the small building the village used as a jail, and the door slammed shut with a finality that made Elias want to scream. He threw himself against the bars, rattling them uselessly. Grushna, Grushna, can you hear me? I am here. Her voice came from the cell next to his, quiet and steady. I am so sorry. I should have made you leave. I should have, Elias. She cut him off. This is not your fault. I chose to stay. I knew the risks. They are going to kill you. His voice broke on the words. I cannot let that happen. You do not have a choice. There was a rustling sound, and then he saw her hand reach through the bars of her cell toward his. He stretched his own hand out, and their fingers just barely touched. Elias, listen to me. What you said to the elders about me mattering to you, I meant it. Every word. I know. And I need you to know, she paused, and he heard her take a shaky breath. You matter to me too. These past months with you, they have been the happiest of my life. I did not know it could be like this, to wake up every day and feel wanted, safe. Maybe even loved, though I do not dare presume. You are not presuming. Elias pressed his face against the bars, trying to get closer to her. Grushna, I love you. I think I have loved you since you laughed at my terrible tea. I love your strength and your honor and the way you hum when you work. I love how you argue with me over stupid things and how you always clean your plate after dinner. I love you, and I am not going to let them take you from me." He heard her sob, a broken sound that shattered his heart. "How are you going to stop them?" "I do not know yet. But I will think of something. I promise." They stayed like that, hands touching through the bars, drawing what comfort they could from the small contact, until the guard came and told them to shut up, or he would move Grushna to a cell on the other side of the building. They fell silent, but Elias did not let go of her hand, and neither did she. Hours passed. Night fell. Elias's mind raced, trying to think of a way out, some plan or trick that would save them, but there was nothing. The cells were solid, the guards were vigilant, and even if he could somehow escape, he could not leave without Grushna. He was almost ready to give in to despair when he heard it, a soft tapping on the window of his cell. He looked up to see a familiar face pressed against the bars. Sarah, the baker's daughter who had always been kind to him. "Sarah," he whispered, "what are you doing here?" "Helping you, you idiot," she hissed back. "Some of us do not think you should hang for showing an orc kindness. Hold on." She worked at the window with a crowbar, and after several tense minutes, the bars came loose with a squeal of protesting metal. The guard in the front room shouted, but before he could reach the cells, Sarah had produced a hammer and knocked him cold. "Go," she said, tossing Elias a knife. "Cut yourselves free and run. There is a horse tied in the alley behind the bakery. Take it and get out of here." "Sarah, they will know you helped us. I will say you overpowered me. Now go before I change my mind." Elias did not need to be told twice. He cut through the ropes binding his wrists, then climbed through the window and ran to the back of the building where the door to Grushna's cell was. Sarah had already unlocked it, and Grushna stood there, free but looking uncertain. "Come on," Elias said, grabbing her hand. "We have to move." They ran through the dark streets of the village, expecting shouts and pursuit at any moment, but the village was quiet, most people asleep. They found the horse where Sarah had said it would be, a sturdy gelding with saddlebags already packed with supplies. "Bless that woman," Elias muttered, helping Grushna into the saddle before mounting behind her. He kicked the horse into a gallop, and they fled into the night, leaving the village and everything Elias had ever known behind. They rode for hours, pushing the horse as hard as they dared, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and pursuit. When the horse finally began to flag, Elias guided them off the road and into the forest, following game trails that he hoped would hide their tracks. Dawn was breaking when they finally stopped in a small clearing beside a frozen stream. Elias dismounted and helped Grushna down, both of them exhausted and shaking with adrenaline and cold. "We cannot stop for long," Elias said, giving the horse water from the stream. "They will come after us as soon as they realize we are gone." "Where will we go?" Grushna asked. She looked lost, overwhelmed, and Elias wanted nothing more than to pull her into his arms and promise her that everything would be okay. "South," he said, "to the free cities you talked about. It will take weeks, maybe months, but if we are careful, we can make it." "Elias, you have lost everything because of me. Your home, your farm, your place in your community. How can you not hate me?" He turned to face her fully, taking her hands in his. "Grushna, you are not the reason I lost those things. The hatred and fear of small-minded people, that is the reason. And yes, I lost my farm, but I gained something so much more valuable." He reached up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheek. "I gained you. And I would make the same choice 1,000 times over." Grushna's eyes filled with tears. "I do not deserve you. You deserve everything," Elias said fiercely. "You deserve a home and safety and people who see you for who you really are. You deserve to be loved, Grushna. And I do love you with everything I am." "I love you too," she whispered, and then she kissed him. It was awkward at first. They had to figure out how to work around her tusks, and they were both trembling with cold and fear and overwhelming emotion. But it was also perfect, a promise sealed with touch, a declaration of everything they were to each other. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were crying and smiling at the same time. "We should keep moving," Elias said reluctantly. "We can figure out the rest as we go." "Together," Grushna said, and it was not a question. "Together," Elias confirmed. They remounted the horse and continued south, toward a future that was uncertain and dangerous but also full of possibility. Behind them, the sun rose over the forest, painting the snow in shades of gold and pink, and Elias chose to see it as a good sign. The journey south was harder than either of them had anticipated. Winter was unforgiving, and they had to avoid roads and villages, traveling through wilderness where the cold bit through their inadequate clothing, and every meal was a struggle to find. But they also had each other, and that made all the difference. At night, they huddled together for warmth, sharing body heat and stories. Grushna told Elias about her childhood, about her mother who had taught her to be strong and her father who had died in a border skirmish when she was young. Elias told her about his dreams for the future, about wanting to build a life somewhere quiet where they could be themselves without fear. "You think such a place exists?" Grushna asked one night as they camped in a cave, waiting out a blizzard. "I have to believe it does," Elias said, his arm around her shoulders. "Otherwise, what are we doing this for?" "For each other," Grushna said simply. "That is enough for me." They survived on game that Elias hunted and plants that Grushna found, her knowledge of foraging saving them more than once. They avoided people when they could, but twice they had to stop in small towns to buy supplies. Elias went in alone while Grushna hid in the woods, both of them terrified that someone would recognize him or ask too many questions. But their luck held, and they made it through without incident. Weeks turned into a month and then two. The landscape began to change as they traveled south, the snow giving way to rain, the dense forests opening up into rolling hills. They crossed the mountains through a pass that Elias remembered from his army days, a treacherous route that took 3 days of climbing and left them both battered and exhausted. But on the other side, the world was different. Warmer, greener even in late winter, and most importantly, more diverse. They saw their first mixed settlement a week after crossing the mountains, a trading post where humans, orcs, and even a few elves mingled freely, conducting business without the undercurrent of hatred and fear that had defined the North. "Is this real?" Grushna whispered, staring at an orc woman haggling with a human merchant over the price of furs. "I think it is," Elias said, wonder in his voice. "I think we made it." They sold the horse. It had served them well. But they needed the coin more than the transportation now, and bought supplies and information. The free city of Meridian was a week's walk to the south, they were told, a place where the treaty was enforced strictly and fairly, where all races were welcome and protected under the law. It sounded like paradise. It sounded like home. They reached Meridian on a bright morning in early spring, cresting a hill to see the city spread out below them, a sprawling collection of buildings and streets, smoke rising from 1,000 chimneys, the sound of life and commerce filling the air. At the gates, guards checked their story refugees from the north, looking for a new start, and waved them through without difficulty. The city was overwhelming after months in the wilderness. So many people, so much noise and color and movement, but it was also wonderful. Elias saw orc families walking with human neighbors, saw children of different races playing together in the streets. He saw a world where what he and Grushna had was not forbidden or scandalous, just normal. They found lodging in a small inn and spent their first night in a real bed in months, holding each other and crying with relief. They had made it. Against all odds, they had survived. The next weeks were a whirlwind of adjustment. Elias found work as a laborer, his farming and military skills making him valuable to the city's merchants. Grushna got a job at a stable, where her way with animals quickly made her indispensable. They saved every copper, living frugally in a tiny rented room, planning for the future. 3 months after arriving in Meridian, Elias came home to find Grushna waiting for him with news. "I found a place," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. "A small farmstead outside the city. The owner is selling because he is too old to work it anymore. It is not much, just a few acres and a cottage that needs repair, but it is ours if we want it. If we pool our savings with what we can borrow, we can afford it." Elias looked at the papers she had brought, at the description of the property and the price, and felt hope bloom in his chest. Their own farm, a place to build a life, to grow things, to be together without fear. "When can we see it?" he asked. They visited the property the next day and fell in love with it immediately. The cottage was small and needed work, but it had good bones and a stone fireplace that reminded Elias of his old home. The land was fertile, with a stream running through it and a barn that could house animals. It was perfect. They made an offer, and after some negotiation, the owner accepted. A week later, they stood in front of their cottage with a deed in hand, officially landowners, officially home. "This is it," Grushna said, looking at the property with wonder. "This is our place." "Our place," Elias agreed. He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Grushna, there is something I want to ask you." She turned to him, curious. "What is it? In this city, mixed marriages are legal, recognized and protected. He paused, suddenly nervous despite everything they had been through. "I want to marry you officially. I want you to be my wife, not just my partner. I want the whole world to know that you are mine and I am yours. Will you marry me?" Grushna stared at him, her eyes going wide, and then she laughed, a sound of pure joy. "Yes, yes, of course I will marry you, you ridiculous man." She threw her arms around him, nearly knocking him over, and they kissed in front of their new home while the spring sun shone down on them, and birds sang in the trees. They were married a month later in a small ceremony at the city's registry office. With 2 witnesses, they had befriended a human woman named Clara, who worked at the stable with Grushna, and an orc man named Durg, who had helped Elias on a construction job. It was simple and quick. Nothing like the elaborate weddings Elias had sometimes seen, but it was theirs, and it was perfect. When the official pronounced them married and Elias slipped a simple iron band onto Grushna's finger, all they could afford, but she looked at it like it was made of gold, he felt something settle in his chest. Peace. Belonging. Home. They spent their first year of marriage building their farm and their life. They planted crops in the spring, watched them grow through the summer, and harvested them in the fall. They repaired the cottage, making it comfortable and warm. They bought chickens and a goat, and Grushna talked constantly about getting a cow come next spring. They made friends in the area, neighbors who did not care that they were a mixed couple, who invited them to gatherings and shared seeds and advice. They went to the market every week, and Grushna started selling eggs and vegetables. Her friendly manner and fair prices earning her a reputation as a trustworthy merchant. At night, they would sit by their fireplace, Grushna reading aloud from whatever book Elias had brought home from the city while he worked on mending tools or carving small figures from wood. Sometimes they would talk about the past, about how far they had come from that night when Grushna had built a lean-to against Elias's fence. Sometimes they would plan for the future, dreaming of expanding the farm or maybe starting a family someday. but mostly they just existed together, in comfortable silence or easy conversation. Two people who had found in each other something they had not known they needed. One evening, nearly 2 years after their arrival in Meridian, they received unexpected visitors. Elias heard the knock on the door and opened it to find Sarah, the baker's daughter who had helped them escape, standing on his porch with a man he did not recognize. "Sarah," Elias said in shock. "What are you doing here?" "Looking for you," Sarah said with a tired smile. "May we come in?" They invited them inside, and over tea, Sarah told her story. After Elias and Grushna had escaped, she had been questioned but had stuck to her story about being overpowered. Edward and the other elders had not believed her, but they had no proof, and she was too popular in the village to punish without evidence. She had stayed for a while, but the atmosphere had become toxic, everyone suspicious of everyone else, and finally she had left. "I came south because I remembered you talking about the free cities," Sarah explained. "I thought if I could find you, you might help me get settled. This is my husband, Mark. We married just before we left." "Of course we will help you," Grushna said immediately. "You saved our lives. We owe you everything." They helped Sarah and Mark find a place to live and work in the city, and over time they became close friends, part of the small family that Elias and Grushna were building in this new place. More refugees from the north came as word spread about the free cities, people fleeing the rigid prejudices and old hatreds. Some were human, some were orc, all of them looking for a place where they could live without fear. Elias and Grushna helped when they could, offering advice and support, paying forward the kindness that had been shown to them. 3 years after their wedding, Grushna told Elias she was pregnant. He had been in the barn, repairing a broken stall, when she came in with a strange expression on her face, nervous and excited and terrified all at once. "I am with child," she said simply, and Elias dropped the hammer he was holding. "You are, we are." He could not seem to form a complete sentence. "Are you certain?" "I am certain. I went to the healer this morning. She confirmed it." Elias crossed the barn in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "We are going to have a baby," he said into her hair, and his voice was full of wonder. "We are going to have a baby," Grushna confirmed. And then they were both crying and laughing and holding each other like they would never let go. The pregnancy was not easy. Grushna was sick for the first few months, and Elias worried constantly, hovering over her until she threatened to hit him with a frying pan if he did not give her some space. But as her belly grew and the baby began to move, his worry transformed into excitement. They prepared a room in the cottage, built a cradle from oak wood, and argued good-naturedly over names. Their daughter was born on a warm summer evening, delivered by a midwife with Elias holding Grushna's hand the whole time. She was perfect, tiny and wrinkled and loud, with green skin a shade lighter than her mother's and eyes that would eventually settle into brown like her father's. She had the smallest tusks Elias had ever seen, just the tiniest nubs and a shock of black hair. They named her Mira, after Grushna's mother, and Elias had never felt love like what he felt holding his daughter for the first time, looking down at this small person who was half him and half Grushna, a living symbol of everything they had built together. Watching Grushna with their daughter was a revelation. She was gentle and fierce all at once, singing orc lullabies and teaching Mira both human and orc words as she grew. Elias taught her to plant seeds in the garden, to collect eggs from the chickens, to be kind and brave and true. Mira grew up knowing she was loved, knowing that her mixed heritage was not something to hide but something to celebrate. She played with human and orc children alike, learning both cultures, belonging to both and neither, and something entirely new. On Mira's 5th birthday, As they celebrated with friends and neighbors in their garden, Elias stood back and watched the scene. Grushna was laughing at something Sarah said, while Mira ran in circles with the other children, shrieking with joy. The farm was thriving, the crops were good, and their home was full of love and life. He thought about that night so long ago when he had seen a figure building a lean-to against his fence. He thought about the choice he had made to bring soup instead of violence, kindness instead of fear. It had cost him everything he thought he wanted, everything he had worked for, and it had given him everything he actually needed. Grushna caught his eye across the garden and smiled, that same smile that had first made him realize he was falling in love with her. And Elias smiled back, his heart full to bursting. They had built something remarkable together, not just a farm or a family, but a whole new life where love was stronger than hate and courage was defined not by violence, but by the willingness to choose compassion, even when it was hard. That evening, after the guests had left and Mira was asleep, Elias and Grushna sat on their porch, watching the sun set over their land. She leaned against his shoulder and he wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. "You ever regret it?" Grushna asked quietly. "Giving up your old life for me?" "Never," Elias said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. "You are my life, Grushna. You and Mira and this place we have built. I would not trade it for anything." "I love you," she said, and even after all these years, the words still made his heart skip a beat. "I love you too," he replied, and they sat together in the fading light, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the ashes of the old world. The stars came out one by one, scattered across the darkening sky like promises, and Elias thought about the future. About Mira growing up strong and happy, about the farm continuing to thrive, about growing old with Grushna by his side. It was a good future, one worth fighting for, one worth every sacrifice he had made. He had brought her soup every night when she was a stranger camped against his fence, a small kindness that had changed both their lives forever. And now, years later, they still shared meals every evening, still found joy in the simple act of being together, still chose love over fear every single day. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything. And as the last light faded from the sky and Grushna's breathing evened out against his shoulder, Elias allowed himself to feel something he had not felt since before the war, complete and perfect peace. This was home. This was family. This was love, and it was theirs for all the days to come.